There has been a, shall we say, level of stupidity around the Middle East that is just really bloody annoying to me. For starters, yes, I'm sewing a patch onto my jacket today. For starters, whether you are pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, regardless of, which side of this equation you're on, there are certain little facts that people conveniently disregard or forget because they're inconvenient. Now, to understand the whole thing in the Middle East, you have to kind of understand the history. I was raised Southern Baptist, so the whole, Israel or the children of Israel are the chosen of God thing was something that I was raised with because, that's a thing. What I believe is kind of irrelevant with regards to religion. However, I am not going into, shall we say, religious views, but more cultural ones. There's a couple things to remember. A few things actually. One, Israel was the home of the Jewish people long before Palestine was ever there. This is the promised home, promised land of the Jewish people. And anyone who seeks to deny this is ignoring history. It has nothing to do with religion. Israel is the Jewish homeland. That's just point of fact. Two, you also have to understand the insanity of the rivalry and hatred between the Jewish people and Muslims, specifically Arabian Muslims. Now, the crazy part in all of this is the Muslims hate the Jews because of some supposed incident that happened that the Jews mistreated Muhammad. I would actually like to know both sides of that story. Because I'm wondering, what did Muhammad do? Oops. I would like to know what Muhammad did to cause the Jews to supposedly treat him the way the Muslims claim that they did. Be that as it may. The screwed up part in all of this comes when you realize that modern-day Palestinians are not actually historic Palestinians at all. I looked this up because it seemed kind of odd to me that this issue is still a thing. And I found out something very interesting, which explains a few things. One, modern-day Palestinians are not actually Palestinian at all. The historical Palestinians are extinct, supposedly. Modern-day Palestinians are actually mixed-blood Jewish Arabs who had converted to Islam. Which explains why all the Arab countries, the Muslim countries, will not allow any Palestinians in their country, full stop. Because they view the Palestinians as subhuman half-breed mongrels, and they don't want them in their country because of their Jewish lineage, partial Jewish lineage. Now, me saying that, and this is being stubborn, me saying that that is completely stupid and ridiculous is not that big of a stretch, considering the fact that when you're talking blood lineage here, the idea of racism, you know, you would think, oh, well, they're not being racist. Actually, yes, they are. There we go. The fact that the Arab Muslims view the Palestinians this way is literally no different than racist white Americans looking at somebody whose entire ancestry is white, except for one great-grandmother who happened to be black, and then finding this out declares that person 100% black, and thus beneath them somehow. That's racist. That is extremely racist. Well, it's the same thing as the way the Palestinians are being treated by both Israel, in particular Netanyahu's regime, and the rest of the Arab world. Now, criticism of a terrorist regime like Hamas is not, however, hatred of Palestinians, as some people would, bizarrely enough, claim. Nor is criticism of Israel in any way anti-Semitic. Criticism of Netanyahu, specifically, is justified because oh well, string's gonna be really stupid today, isn't it? Because criticism of a genocidal fascist totalitarian dictatorship is fully justifiable when they commit genocide against an entire people. Look at Moscovia versus Ukraine. Just saying. Why are you being stubborn? I'm having an argument with my sewing thread here. Bear with me a moment. So yeah, an criticism of Netanyahu is not in any way anti-Semitic, any more than criticism of Hamas is in any way anti-Palestine. Hamas does not equal Palestine, let alone Palestinian civilians, just like Netanyahu does not in any way equal the Israeli Jewish people as a whole. These are two completely separate things. And it is completely legitimate to criticize a small group of people who are committing genocide against an entire population without lumping in the entire other population. And I'm really sick and tired of people conflating the two. Criticism of it's like criticism of Putin and his regime is not in any way lumping all Muscovites into that. There are quite a few Muscovian people. The Russian dude on YouTube, Sanctioned Ivan, Vlad Vexler. There's a few. There's even a guy, Roman, it's got a string of numbers is the name of his channel that I can never remember because it's a weird string of letters. But, yeah, these guys are all very much against Putin's regime and the genocidal terrorism against Ukraine. They're on Ukraine's side in this regard. They're ethnic Muscovian. They're not part of the genocidal regime that's attacking Ukraine. Well, same thing in the Middle East. Hamas is not the whole of Palestine, nor is Netanyahu the whole of Israel. Don't conflate the two. This keeps knocking. Yes, I'm trying to do this with a jacket on the table. One of these days I'll actually have a proper setup, I suppose. Now, religion aside, because quite frankly, I don't care. You can believe whatever the hell you want, religiously speaking. However, I will not support any group of people who insist on committing acts of terrorism and genocide against another. I don't care if it's Netanyahu and his regime, Putin and his regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Islamic State, ISIL-K. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's, one administration of the U.S. government. One particular one. I don't care who it is. If you're committing terrorism and genocide against another group of human beings, you're completely in the wrong. And I don't care what your reasons are. You have no right to say that another group of people is not allowed to exist. Every ethnic culture has a right to exist. It's when they seek to genocide others that it becomes a problem. That being said, I grew up hearing about the two-state solution in Israel. I tend to be an optimistic realist. Optimistically, I was hoping everything would be okay and people would, finally get over their generational trauma and ethnic hatred and actually get along and things would be okay and people would actually, stop trying to murder each other. The realist in me knew that a two-state solution was never going to work because the Muslim extremists are hell-bent on genociding every last Jewish person on the planet. Hamas's own charter, point-blank states, kill all the Jews, period. I bumped the camera. And Israel, depending on who was in power at the time, was never going to allow a Muslim state within their borders, at least not for very long. Unfortunately, I was correct. And now we have the problem that we have in the Middle East, in Israel currently. Iran is allied with Putin. Hezbollah is being financed and supported by Iran, which in turn finances and supports Hamas, despite the fact that they will not allow any Palestinians in their country whatsoever. I already covered that part. And Putin is keen on the destabilization of the Middle East because that distracts the West from the atrocities that he and his regime are committing against Ukraine. It's all connected. No man, let alone country, is an island unto themselves. We are all interconnected as a species, as a world. We trade with other countries. And anyone who tries to sell you the isolationist ideology is seeking the complete and utter destruction of their own country. Isolationism, whenever adopted by a country, is a death sentence to that country. There are a great many people smarter than me, more knowledgeable than me, that have stated this across the last 100 years. So don't listen to anybody who tries to sell you an isolationist ideology, because they're hell-bent on destroying your country. This includes, but is not limited to, MAGA Republicans and their overinflated Cheeto that they have deemed is the second coming of God, or whatever the hell. That man cannot run a business. He has no business running a country, considering how many bankruptcies he's gone through. Never mind the fact that he's a proven criminal, but that's beside the point. When you have somebody who is massively in love with and supportive of totalitarian fascists in other countries trying to become a dictator of his own country, there's a problem. And anybody who supports it, and this isn't just MAGA, this is any politician anywhere in the world. When you have somebody who seeks to become a dictator for life in their own country, and they manage to convince, brainwash, whatever, people into supporting that person in that endeavor, and that person gains power, the country will find itself literally on death's door. Fortunately for most democracies, the fact that it's a democracy is about the only thing that saves those countries from such people. True democracies, in that the will of the people prevails over anything else. The structure of the U.S. government is such that it prevents one person from completely taking over the country, usually. That doesn't mean that one person cannot stonewall the government, as Mike Johnson is doing currently. If you want to know exactly where somebody stands, listen to the propaganda that they repeat, the narratives that they push, the things that they say. And when you realize who they're actually rooting for based on the things that they say, you will know, one, where they stand in regards to any given conflict, two, where they actually stand with regards to you. That said, I am a constitutionalist humanitarian, progressive constitutionalist humanitarian. I am neither right nor left. I am neither conservative or liberal. I believe in the constitutional rights of all human beings, not just Americans, and that all human beings deserve to have and should have those constitutional rights, regardless of whether they're American or otherwise. It's called global democracy and humanity. We have the right to live as we choose, believe as we choose, so long as we are not causing harm to others. You cause deliberate harm to others, justice will come for you. And I truly believe that. I will not support any terrorist regime or fascist dictator on any level. Period. And once a person proves themselves to be such, I will never support them. The reason I support Ukraine is because these are an innocent people who, one, were never a threat to Moscow and had no intention of being a threat to Moscow. And yet Moscow has decided to genocide them because they want the resources in Ukraine, which is why they are going scorched earth on every city in Ukraine. and killing every single person that they can find in Ukraine, especially Ukrainians. It's not just territory. They never let go of their imperialist bullshit. Well, with the Middle East, it's much the same thing. You have terrorist organizations seeking to genocide a specific ethnicity, and you have a leader of that ethnicity who seeks to genocide everybody else for threatening his people. Now, I understand his reasoning, but I do not condone his methods. Quite frankly, Israel needs a different leadership because they're not going to get anywhere with regards to any kind of a peace whatsoever in the Middle East so long as Netanyahu remains in power. At least according to everything that I have seen. My thimble caught the thread. Oops. So there's that. It blows my mind how people get extremely triggered and go full on snowflake Karen when you give a legit criticism of wrongdoing, actual wrongdoing. And then they like completely blow it out of proportion, which is why the gross toxicity of the Israel-Palestine conflict issue. If you say anything against Hamas, oh, you're anti-Palestine. If you say anything against Netanyahu, oh, you're anti-Semitic. If you criticize the Israeli government for their actions in Gaza, oh, you're anti-Semitic. No, I'm anti-genocide. There's a difference. And people need to learn that fact. But, you know, it is what it is. And really, people shouldn't have to, you know, go on a rant to explain their views on something when they give legitimate criticism of war crimes and crimes against humanity. It's ridiculous. It really is. Yes, Israel, Palestine, Middle East is a hot button topic, tends to trigger people. Yeah, I get it. The fact that the West, the fact that the West, because of, oops, I broke a thread. The fact that the West is very staunchly Christian, which comes from, it's sort of a bastardized version of Judaism. And anybody who criticizes the children of Israel, quote unquote, God's chosen children, gets treated like a pariah in the West is a little bit nuts, especially when people actually give legit criticisms of acts of genocide and crimes against humanity. Like I said, my mother happens to be one of those who is very pro-Israel. I haven't discussed with her this whole thing about Israel versus Palestine, mostly because I don't want to get into that argument with her. I know her stance regarding Palestine, or rather Israel, and I know that she would be very pro-Israel. I do seem to remember her saying something about Netanyahu and the IDF acting against their own best interest with regards to other, well, in particular Palestine. But I don't recall specifically her view on the whole thing. Like I said, it's not a can of worms I really want to open, to be honest. I try to keep the peace as much as possible because, well, as I said, I am a optimistic realist. I'm also a humanitarian by nature. And I'd rather not engage in conflict if I can avoid it. It's just less stressful that way. Especially when it's a conflict that doesn't involve me. But the forbidding of any criticism of the actions of any government and conflating that with racism, it just makes no sense. It's like saying the criticism of the U.S. government and their treatment of the Turtle Island Nation's people over the last 300 years especially is somehow racist against white people. No, it's a criticism of the government and the church that the government allowed to commit these acts of genocide against an entire population. It's not the same thing as saying all white people are bad, which some people do actually say that. I do not. And I know somebody's probably going to say, oh, but you're white. Not really. I am Irish, Scottish, and Cheyenne by blood heritage. Cheyenne is one of the Turtle Island nations, Northern Plains specifically. Irish and Scottish are Celtic. Celtic people aren't white or blue. Only the people from the Caucasus are Caucasian. saying. And in case you're wondering why I say Celtic people are blue, Celtic people have very, very fair skin. To the point, you can see their veins through their skin, tints their skin blue. Plus, Celtic people have this tradition of painting their skin with a blue paint that comes from a plant. It's called woad. The name of the Pictish people comes from that, actually. Painted men, as it were. Celtic people aren't white or blue. Can't really see it on camera, but it's there. My skin is fair enough, being half Irish. Yeah. I was telling a friend of mine, Celtic people aren't white, we're blue. And why? She is Scottish, Sea Sami, and traveler. And she was laughing her butt off. So, I'm not the only one who recognizes that. Genocide is an act of evil. It doesn't matter who does it, and it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter where or when this is happening. It's an act of evil, period. And anyone who makes excuses for it, or allows it to happen or turns a blind eye is just as complicit as those who commit the acts of genocide. So, make of that what you will. I am very pro-humanitarian, pro-human being. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your gender identity or sexuality is. You're a human being, and you deserve to be treated as such. Period. There are people who will go after me for that because they are racist or sexist or, whatever their ideology is that has them declaring certain people as subhuman. Yeah, y'all can fuck off. Because I ain't gonna listen to that rhetoric from anybody. Period. Now, if you want to have a legitimate discourse regarding people and, addressing their actual actions, good, bad, or indifferent, we can have a discussion. But I will not, and I mean will not, condemn an entire people for the actions of a few. Nor will I tolerate hate for the sake of someone's ideology. I don't care what their reason is. And this goes back to the Muslims and their hatred of the Jews and their hatred of the Muslims. Kind of comes down to the idea of, can't we all just get along? But human toxicity won't allow it, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but it is what it is. I have absolutely nothing against anybody. I have friends who are Jewish. I've met some very interesting Muslim people. I have met people from all walks of life all over the world. Over the last 28 years, since the late 80s, late 90s. You'll forgive me, I was born in 74, and to me the 90s were only about 10 years ago. In my head. Time is weird. Anyway. Since the late 90s, when I started getting online and talking to people, I have come to know a great many people around the world. Different people. I have met some really cool people from all walks of life, and I have met some complete shitheads that I would love to just slap upside the head with a 2x4. People tend to frown on physical violence, so I'm not going to do that. A verbal 2x4, possibly, but not a literal one. And pretty much everything in between. If you treat others with humanity and compassion, I will have no problem with you at all. I don't care what your ethnocultural background is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care about any of that superficial crap. I care about how you treat others. That is number one. Period. If you treat others like shit, you're not going to get my respect on any level. That's just all there is to it. And that's how it should be with anybody, really. Unfortunately, too many people think that they're justified in treating others like shit for, whatever imagined reason they've come up with. Frankly, those people can fuck off. The reason for this particular rant was because I was watching Andrew Mercado. Yes, I'm an orc hunter among his community, as well as one of the Ukrainians' rollers, hence the patches. But Andrew was talking about the level of toxicity among the Israel-Palestine thing online. And talking about how bad it is. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with people? Why is this even a thing? And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? This should probably be addressed. So here I am. Now, I am not an expert on, anything, quite frankly, let alone the whole shitstorm in the Middle East at all. But I know what I see. And what I see is a bunch of bullshit. And that bullshit needs to stop. As I said, genocide is an act of evil. Period. And I will never condone it. I don't care who the genocide is against. The elimination of a terrorist regime is not genocide. In most cases, the elimination of a terrorist regime is self-defense of everybody else. Case in point, Nazi Germany, the 1940s. That wasn't the eradication of all Germans, it was simply the defeat and elimination of a genocidal regime that had taken over Germany. There's a... yes, it comes from a movie, it comes from a work of fiction, but it's very apt. People seem to forget that the first country the Nazis invaded was their own. The same is true in Muscovia and the totalitarian fascist imperialists running that country. The same is true with Hamas and Hezbollah and all the other religious extremists. Same is true here in the US with the Christo-fascists. The first country they invaded was their own. And they're trying to destroy anything and everyone that doesn't align with their ideology. And that's the first step towards a Nazi type fallout within your own country. Especially when they start genociding everyone else. Bear that in mind. Especially for those of us in the US who are looking at an impossible choice come election time.